Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail and may not be suitable for children under the age of 13. Listener discretion is advised. So I believe this is episode 13.
I believe that's where we're at. Yeah.
13, I think. It's so funny how I can never quite remember. But everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson dead.
And it's just the two of us today. Everyone else is they're preoccupied and doing other things because we're recording this on Memorial Day. I know this is going to come out like 9 days from now. So by the time everybody hears this, it won't be Memorial Day anymore, obviously. But yeah, it's just the two of us hanging out tonight. So you're stuck with us. None of the girls are here tonight.
We're still probably gonna hopefully entertain you just as much.
I would hope so. If not, then we have some rethinking, some life choices to
Yeah,
rethink.
I mean, if not, we're just handing it over to the girls.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if I want to hand over the reins. So I do know that we had someone reach out to us in terms of another case suggestion.
Ooh, I love
Although
the suggested cases.
I do too. This one, however, isn't finished yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's still a trial to be had. So I personally want to just wait a little bit until the trial is over.
Okay. All
And then we'll
right.
then we'll dive in. I mean, if it takes too much longer, maybe we'll do like a quick little case on it and then do an update later.
Yeah, that's
But
kind of where are they now kind of thing.
yeah, sort of like it's hard. I like to have an answer if I can have a bow at the end. I like that.
Of course.
But where the trial is still actually going on, like while things are still being investigated, we don't know how long those things can take. So
Right. Trials could be over real quick or they could drag on for years and years and years.
correct. And this one is so interesting that who knows how long this one will take. So, but I am looking forward to doing that one because I love the case suggestions. This one came in from his name is Shark Dead, but his real name is
Oh,
Paul. You've actually
okay.
met him.
Oh, yes, I know Shark Dead. Yep.
Yes. So he is the one who suggested this case. So once we get more information, hopefully the trial will wrap up. I just got to dig into it a little further, but yeah, I'm gonna look into that one, and that could be a future case.
What
And
was there any police tampering from what you could have seen so far?
well, here's the funny part. Yes,
Oh,
and
God, figures.
yes.
Yeah,
It
right on the nose. I knew
the
it.
the person who was killed is a police officer,
Oh,
and it's believed he was killed by other police officers.
oh, God.
Yeah. So, but I don't want to say anything more than that. This one is a really good one.
All right, so
And
there's a little teaser for that case.
that's right. And I know you're looking into a case to
I
actually
am.
present
Yep.
on your own, which is exciting.
Yes.
And as is Joyous Debt. So that's cool. We can have all three of us presenting soon enough. So we just got to, make this happen. And the thing is, we're all busy. We all have lives outside of this, which make it a little harder. So,
Though this does, make the mundane life much more exciting. You look forward to this recording, you look forward to these cases and interacting with all you guys out there. It takes us away from the reality of life for a while. So,
which
you know,
doesn't
I,
hurt.
no, not at all. Nope.
Although we have a weird way of quote unquote escaping the realities of life by going into murders.
It's like people that watch horror movies and things like that and then can just fall asleep right away.
Right. Yeah, because we're tapped.
Oh, of course. No one ever said we were normal.
I would say Erin is the most normal of the four of us that does this. She's definitely the normal one.
She'll learn. She'll learn.
We'll see. So today's case, I'm going to be discussing the death of Superman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like Doomsday killed him in the 90s. So we're going to talk about that.
That was a complete out of left field. I was not expecting that at all. Now I'm really excited.
No, we're really going to be talking about the mysterious death of George Reeves,
Ah, there
who
we go.
played Superman. So, do you
Okay.
remember George Reeves as Superman?
Vaguely, maybe not as much as some of the others, but yes, I do remember him.
So yeah, I remember watching him as a kid, the black and white Superman TV shows before. I mean, I think I don't remember how old I was when the Christopher Reeves, no relation by the way, when the Christopher Reeve Superman movies came out. I remember being young. It was the early 80s. So I was very young, but I still remember the old George Reeves TV serial in black and white. And I still remember even as a kid laughing because he would stand there as they would, fire the gun at his chest, but when they threw the gun at him, he would duck. I remember those. I remember laughing at those. But yeah, so we're going to be discussing the mysterious death of George Reeves. Now,
Yeah.
again, how much do you know about that?
I don't. I don't
Wow.
really. I mean, like I said, I knew very little about him in general, but I'm always excited to learn about this stuff, so throw it at me.
All right. And me being a huge Superman fan, this just something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I mean, as we get to the end, we'll discuss our thoughts, and then we'll invite the listeners at home to post and comment and let us know their thoughts. So with that said, George Reeves was born on January 5th, 1914, as George Kiefer Brewer in Woolstock, Iowa, and he was the son of Donald Carl Brewer and Helen Lesher. He was born 5 months into the marriage of his parents, and obviously there was some stuff going on in the 1910s there. Um, but unfortunately, his parents would separate soon after his birth. Now, at that time, Reeves and his mother had moved from Iowa to Kentucky to stay with relatives for a time, and then they would later move from there to Galesburg, Illinois. Later, Reeves' mother moved to California to stay with her sister, and it was there that she met and married a man by the name of Frank Joseph Basolo in 1927. He would adopt George and give him the name Basolo. After being adopted, he would then go on to be George Basolo.
Oh wow.
Mhm. Reeves' father married a woman by the name of Helen Schultz in 1925, but Reeves reportedly never saw his father again. And in 1927, he would be adopted by his stepfather, taking on the name Basolo. There are some reports that claim that his mother, once George got old enough and asked about his father, there are reports that claim that she told him his father had died, but that's not common enough to be substantiated. Like it doesn't show up in every report. It's just a little weird that she would just be like, not instead of just telling him any kind of truth, she'd be like, no, your father died. He's dead. So that's
Yeah, I mean, it seems like she's trying to protect herself from having to answer or deal with anything.
very possibly. And of course and then of course when he asked, these are according to some reports, she told him that he had committed suicide.
Oh, that's a lovely thing to tell your child.
Correct. So there's some weird stuff. And then there are some reports that I saw that claim it wasn't his father she said that about, but his stepfather that she said committed suicide, like years later, I guess. So there's some weird stuff here where this moment in George Reeves's life is, depending upon where you're getting your information, it doesn't quite line up, but the general theme is there. But Solo, the stepfather, did actually die on March 4th of 1944 at the age of 51. And that was after George would had already started his movie career. So at some point, his mother and his stepfather must have separated. And so that's what I'm saying. But a lot of this information is very wishy-washy. But either way, George Reeves basically grew up without a real father figure, or at least he only had one stepfather figure for a short time who did adopt him. But both men would be out of his life before his acting career actually took off.
I mean, that's definitely rough, especially for a young man to grow up without the father figure.
Yes, yes, it is. Especially back then, I think. I think we're a bit more used to it today.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of where my mind went. I kind of went back in time thinking, it's much rougher back then than it is now.
Yeah,
Comparing it to today's standards, it's much more common practice or much more
right.
common to see.
Correct. And but the question is society better or worse for it? All right.
Uh, uh,
Yeah. So for a little while, George Reeves became a boxer. He was actually pretty good at it from what I can read. But he had stopped boxing because, and this is, again reported, his mother told him he was too handsome to be putting his face through that kind of abuse. So he stopped.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so she then asked him to do something a bit less, physically demanding on his own face. And he started acting and singing in high school, and that continued on to where he'd be performing on stage as a student at the Pasadena Junior College. Oh, that one was hard. And this is an American place. I'm not I'm not
Yeah,
even messing up like Japan or
I was gonna say
Australia
you
or
did better with the
Korea,
Japanese names.
right? What is going on? So while studying acting at the Pasadena Playhouse, Reeves met his future wife, Eleanora Needles, the great great granddaughter of the circus magnate John Robinson, founder of the John Robinson Circus.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
I know I'm like, I'd never really heard of that place. I'm familiar with Barnum's and Bailey's,
Yeah.
but obviously back then that was probably a pretty big deal. They married on September 22nd, 1940, in San Gabriel, California, at the Church of Our Savior. They had no children together, but would be divorced 10 years later. So, as you see, we're kind of skipping quite ahead very quickly in Reeves's life here because there's not a
Yeah.
lot going on.
Apparently not. Wow.
Now, Reeves' film career actually began in 1939 when he was cast as Stuart Carlton, incorrectly listed in the film's credit as Brent Carlton, one of Scarlett O'Hara's suitors in, a film that no one remembers called Gone with the Wind.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, his
Yeah,
first film role, and he's in Gone with the Wind.
that's impressive.
Yeah, that's in a weird way, and this is like because I always go back to the same few things in my head. It's almost like Mark Hamill being cast in Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yep.
you're really gonna have to struggle to get past that hurdle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you peaked right away.
Now his role was a minor role, and he had him and this other guy named Fred Kane were in the film's first like the opening scene. Both of men had to dye their hair red to portray the Carlton twins. Now, after Gone with the Wind was filmed, Reeves returned to the Pasadena Playhouse and was given the lead role in a play called Poncho. This part directly led to his being contracted to Warner Brothers. So, like at this point, they were noticing him. Warner Brothers changed his name professionally to George Reeves. Reeves comes out of nowhere. Like there's no history for him, which is why later when Christopher Reeve comes in to play Superman, everyone thought they were related. I
Oh,
remember
I'm
growing
sure.
up thinking they were father and son. But
Yeah,
no,
I can see that. Yeah.
his Gone with the Wind screen credit reflects the change. So like when you're watching that film, you can see George Reeves. Like that was they were able to put that in post production.
Oh, cool.
So between the start of the production of Gone with the Wind and its release 12 months later, several films on his Warner Brothers contract were made and released, making Gone with the Wind his first film role, but the fifth film to be released that he starred in.
Huh. Wow.
So, yeah, so it's funny how that works. Like, it's really his first film role, but if you look at it in order of release, it's his fifth. So, that's some weird, I mean, that's Hollywood for you, I guess. I mean, I also think the post production on a movie like Gone with the Wind probably took a lot longer than the average film.
Oh, of course.
So Reeves would star in a number of two real shorts and appeared in several B pictures, including two with future President Ronald Reagan and three with James Cagney. So Reeves was mingling with some pretty good people here.
Yeah, he was in real good company. Wow.
But these roles did little to advance Reeves's career, and his contract with Warner Brothers was dissolved by mutual consent. So at this point, he's released from the Warner contract and he signs a contract with 20th Century Fox, but was released after only a handful of films, one of which was the Charlie Chan movie Dead Men Tell. Like I said, he continues to interact with all these famous people, like these people who've done a lot of good with their careers. And I say that because in his mind, he must be imagining that he's higher than he is.
Oh yeah, it probably went right to his head.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to picture another thing. Like it'd be like a local garage band getting a chance to tour with like Queen. and then after the tour, they go back to playing, the local venues, and it just doesn't feel like enough for them because they just did all these stadium shows. So I feel that that's probably what was going through George Reeves's head at this point. So 20th Century Fox loaned him to producer Alexander Korda to co-star with Merle Oberon in a film called Lydia, which was a box office failure. After that, Reeves started to freelance looking to find work in westerns. His friend, Teddy Sherman, had introduced him to her father, Harry Sherman, who was a producer, and he asked Reeves to do a screen test with Teddy for the Hopalong Cassidy films. So Reeves and Sherman impressed the casting director by performing a seven pages of script in a single take without pause. So these guys were used to
Wow.
these guys were used to the Hollywood actors who had to like constantly ask for their lines and be fed stuff. They just went in and did a full 7 pages, which I don't know how much you know about screenplays, but each page is supposed to take about a minute. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
7 minutes without pausing or asking for, a cut. So Reeves would go on to appear in 5 of the Hopalong Cassidy westerns before being cast as Lieutenant John Summers opposite Claudette Colbert, or Colbert, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. So in the movie So Proudly We Hail in 1942. And this was a war drama from Paramount Pictures, which signed Reeves up for 2 films a year. However, Reeves was so inspired by what he went through and what he saw and read about during So Proudly We Hail that he put his acting career on hold and he went and enlisted in the army for World War II. He,
Wow.
I mean, there was a lot of people who did that. I believe Joe DiMaggio did that, or
I was going to say a good majority of the baseball players were involved in enlisting in some way, shape, or form.
yeah, it was a big deal. So he was assigned to the U.S. Army Air Forces and performed. And this is the sad part for him. They had him performing at the
Oh my God.
at the USAAF Broadway shows, and he was doing things called Winged Victory. They never actually let him go see combat, or at least not that I read. They pretty much had him acting and singing and shit like that.
I mean, now once again the comparison between now and then. Now that would be a great thing to do. You're kind of acclaimed if you do that, but back then you wanted to be. It was expected for you to be part of the action if you enlisted.
Yeah, it's probably very disappointing that, or maybe not disappointing. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe emasculating. Where you want to go and show your bravery and your courage and your patriotism, and they make you sing and act instead
Yeah.
of fight. Yeah. So I can see where he might be a little upset by that. This was followed, once he was done, it was followed by a national tour and a movie version of that show, Winged Victory. So he would basically at this point start getting out and immediately go back to this kind of work. But while he was still in, they transferred him to, and I'm not even kidding, the Army Air Force's first motion picture unit, where he made training films.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. He never really got to get away from acting. He was discharged at the end of the war and he returned to Hollywood. At this point, many of the studios were slowing down their production schedules, and some production units had shut down entirely. So he kind of comes back to a different world in terms of what was happening in Hollywood when he left versus what's happening when he returns. He did appear in a pair of outdoor thrillers with Ralph Bird, and as more and more time passed between his acting jobs, they were paying less and less. And he was kind of reduced to appearing in low budget serial programs like The Adventures of Sir Galahad, and taking on a second job, and I'm not kidding, of digging cesspools.
Wow. He can't catch a break, huh?
Well, what ended up happening was he was literally watching, he had to have his cesspool like taken out of his house. And he was watching him do it. He was talking to the people while they were doing it. And he's thinking to himself, I can do this. Like, this isn't that hard. So later, when I guess as the story goes, like his one of his neighbors needed a new cesspool, and he literally turned around and said, I'll do it for you for this much. They're going to charge you this, but I'll do it for this. So literally in between gigs, he's there changing out cesspools.
Changing one costume for another.
I guess, yeah. So as I said, he would get on, he would take on other roles, and he actually was even able to play against his general type. And he starred as villains. Like there was a gold hunter in a Johnny Weissmuller film, Jungle Jim. I guess I've never seen it, which again it makes me think of a kid's playground, a jungle gym. But this one was a name like Jungle Jim, like George of the Jungle, but Jungle Jim. He did separate from his wife around this point. Their divorce became final in 1950. Reeves did move to New York City for a spell after that or during that. He performed in live television anthology programs as well as on the radio, but he would return to Hollywood in 1951 when he was offered a role in the Fritz Lang film Rancho Notorious. In 1953, Reeves played a minor character, Sergeant Malon Stark, in the movie From Here to Eternity. That film won the Academy Award for Best Picture and gave Reeves the distinction of appearing in two Best Picture films. Gone with the
Wow.
Wind in that one. Yeah,
There
exactly.
you go.
So again, here's a guy who should be more recognized than he is. I can only imagine how that was probably eating at him.
And he's doing everything he possibly can to try to make it work.
Right, exactly. So he's working his ass off. It's around this point that George Reeves would meet a woman named Toni Mannix. And we need to talk about Toni Mannix. So here we go. Toni Mannix was born Camille Bernice Frumis on February 19th, 1906, in New York City. Her father, Charles, was a French immigrant, and her mother, Elizabeth, was a French Canadian Roman Catholic. They had a large family that would ultimately include 11 children.
Oh boy.
Right? 7 boys and 4 girls. This just goes back to, I think of that Jim Gaffigan joke where whenever his family talks about their kids, they're like, yep, 8 kids Catholic, as if they have to say Catholic to explain why they have so many kids.
Right? Yeah.
So yeah, 11 kids Catholic right here. Um, the children were raised in their mother's faith. Mannix's father was a department store window decorator in Rochester, New York, and her mother stayed home and took care of the family. For a time, Toni Mannix was a Ziegfeld Follies showgirl and appeared in the MGM biography of Florence Ziegfeld's life, The Great Ziegfeld. So at this point, she's sort of got a little career going on for herself. And she was then, at this point, her name was Toni Lanier, the Ziegfeld dancer and actress. She met the MGM's general manager, a man by the name of Eddie Mannix, in the 1930s. She later lived with him as his mistress, and then they got married and she was his wife until his death in 1963, which we'll get to later. Shortly after her marriage to Mannix in 1951, but shortly before the launch of George Reeves' career to stardom in the television show The Adventures of Superman, Mannix met and began having an extramarital affair with Reeves with the permission of her husband. And this is coming from people that knew them, like Noel Neal, who played Lois Lane on the show, and Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen on the show. Everybody knew that Eddie Mannix didn't really give a shit that his wife, Toni, was sleeping with George Reeves.
Oh, okay.
Right, exactly. Now, it's important that we talk about Toni's husband, Eddie. As you can see, I'm setting all the pieces in place here. Eddie Mannix was born in Fort Lee, New Jersey. He was the son of John and Lizzie, christened Joseph Edgar Allen John Mannix. That was
Say that 10 times fast.
right. Joseph Edgar Allen John Mannix. He used Edgar Joseph Mannix as his official name, but was known to most of his associates as Eddie, and he was of Irish Catholic descent. After working as a bouncer and then treasurer for the Palisades Amusement Park, he became involved in the motion picture industry, eventually working his way up to the general manager within MGM in the 1920s. Rumors swirl around Eddie Mannix. He's rumored to have connections to the mafia and organized crime. Titles aside at MGM, Mannix quickly settled into the role of all around fixer. So these are where some of the reports come in. A lot of these aren't substantiated, but we're going to talk about some of the things he's rumored to have been involved in.
Did
He
he pay
worked,
any cops off?
probably. He did work in tandem with MGM's head of publicity, Howard Strickling, a dapper former journalist. I had to keep that worded exactly as I had read it, like just the use of the word dapper. Um, yeah, he was a former journalist who controlled how the press reported on the MGM stars and their films. Strickling made sure that scandals didn't make it into the papers, which often meant giving reporters alternate stories to print, and probably also giving the reporters as well as their other stars, instructions and misdirections and things like that. Meanwhile, while Strickling is doing this, Manick is making sure scandals went away. He's that fixer. So while Strickling distracted the media, it's Mannix who arranged to get unruly stars out of drunk tanks and prisons. Who he made sure he paid off victims of car accidents and fistfights. He arranged abortions, whether the actresses wanted them or not.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh,
And if he couldn't scare us like a famous star straight himself, that's when Mannix would call in old friends from New Jersey to deliver messages for him. He'd read every telegram sent or received through the studio, including personal messages sent by the stars. So he knew what everyone was doing and saying, which would be impossible today with cell phones.
he sounds like quite the bully.
Well, he's a high paid mafia guy trying to keep a movie studio, their reputation shiny. One of the ways that the executives could stay on top of any of the trouble that was brewing was him reading all their messages. And this way they could plan how to respond to a scandal before it happened and preventing it. So if you got to keep in mind that a lot of these actors back then were, secretly gay. They weren't out as being gay. So this is another way they could kind of control the flow of information to make sure that nobody knew these things. So though Mannix developed close friendships with some of the stars, for instance, he was almost like family to Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. He could be extremely unforgiving to the stars under his watch. As you can imagine, just imagine having a mafia guy telling you what to do every day.
Yeah. Oh my God, no.
So there were some reports of an actress named Patricia Douglas being raped by someone from MGM, and she had gone to the hospital and reported the rape. MGM contacted Mannix to go down and take care of this.
I don't like where this is going.
Mannix hired detectives to dig up dirt on Douglas, the victim of the rape. When they couldn't find any, other girls at the party where the rape had allegedly taken place were encouraged to give statements about how Douglas, who, according to her, never drank, was in fact so drunk she was incorrigible and quote unquote asking for it. So
So
Mannix,
they're spinning their own stories because they can't find anything.
correct. They need her to shut up. So now they're going to make it a war, a media war against her instead of, punishing the person that assaulted her. So Mannix and those that were working for and with him essentially turned the narrative against Douglas, and her case in court against them just completely fell apart, as did her career in Hollywood. But the sad part is no one would be aware of this particular incident for 60 years. When a hungry newspaper reporter went and found it, they dug it up. 60 years.
That must have been one big meal if you're that hungry. Holy crud.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't even imagine I can't imagine finding it, just stumbling on it. Back to George Reeves. In June of 1951, Reeves was offered the role of Superman in a new television series titled The Adventures of Superman. He was initially reluctant to take the role because, like many actors of his time, he considered television to be unimportant and believed that few would actually see his work. believe it or not, it wasn't until I want to say the late 90s that people actually took television any very serious. Most people didn't want to do television.
Wow.
Yeah, really, I think HBO with The Sopranos and shows like that, I think that was the first time people really started to take television serious. Because
Really that late on?
yeah, well, I mean, Bill Cosby was doing it, for example, but his career was based on television. He had his movies, but mostly it was television. Most Hollywood actors in films didn't want to do TV. And some people even still say that today. Even though Liam Neeson appeared in the Obi-Wan show, there was reports that he initially didn't want anything to do with it because it was television. Filming for the Superman show would be on an incredibly tight schedule because they were a half hour long, but they would try to do 2 episodes every 6 days.
Wow, that's a ragged schedule.
Right, and according to commentaries on the DVDs for the show, they had sets and multiple scripts. All this stuff was filmed simultaneously for different episodes to take advantage of the fact that the set was right there and everybody was present. So, for example, all of like the Perry White office scenes, if for like 3 or 4 episodes, would be shot at the same time. So all the people, all the actors are wearing the same clothes. So it looks like Perry White never goes home to change his clothes for work.
Now, see, that would be a whirlwind. I don't understand how actors do it. How do you keep track of what episode you're on, or, like especially if you're shooting multiples, like,
Right.
no
And that,
way.
but you as the actor, that's not your responsibility. There's like a stage manager and a set manager. There's someone who does blocking. So you just like if they're really on it, right? You're gonna show up and they're say, okay, okay, Jameson, you have 3 scenes, and they're gonna say, here's the outfit you need to wear in the first scene, change into this, sit down, we'll do your hair and makeup, blah, blah, blah. So they're gonna take care of all that. All you have to do is go in there and read your lines. So
Okay.
yeah,
All
they're
right.
really on it. So that's why a lot of times, for example, and I always go back to Star Wars, but Natalie Portman said when after they filmed Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, they were filming in just this big room with all these green screens. And she's like, so there I am jumping and ducking and tumbling. She's like, I don't know what this looks like. It's not until I sit and watch the movie that I get to see what George Lucas's vision actually was. So all that jumping and tucking and rolling is when her and Anakin are in that droid factory,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
So she has no idea until she sees it. All they have to do is go in and do what they're told, and someone else is telling them what costume to wear. So it's not on the actors, it's on everyone else. Little side note there. We just got off on a tangent.
It still pertains, though.
So Reeves' career as Superman had begun with the Superman and the Mole Men film, and that was intended to be both a B picture and a pilot for the TV series. Immediately after completing it, Reeves and the crew began production for the first season of episodes, which were shot over 13 weeks in the summer of 1951. So now imagine that 13 weeks. It means they filmed over 20 episodes. So the series,
Impressive.
yeah, it's really impressive. So the series went on air the following year, and Reeves was amazed at how quickly he became a national celebrity. In 1952, the struggling ABC network purchased the show for national broadcast, which gave him that greater visibility. Now, the Superman cast had restrictive contracts preventing them from taking other work that might interfere with the series. As you can imagine, with their shooting schedule, they can't have anything kind of coming into play there.
And especially with so much that they were doing in that amount of time, I'm guessing they probably didn't do much of anything else.
Yeah, probably not. So, except for the second season, the Superman schedule was brief. 13 shows shot 2 per week, a total of 7 weeks out of the year, and they all had a 30-day clause. And that's basically the point, which meant that producers could demand that their exclusive services for a new season, like they could say, you have 4 weeks. Like they can call you out and say you have to come back. You have like basically once they're done, you have a month off and they can call you back. They say, hey, we picked up a new season. Now you got to come back. You have 30 days, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
So that prevented any long term work for other major films with long schedules. Like you couldn't do stage plays that might lead to lengthy runs. You really couldn't take on any other series work. Now, Reeves, however, he earned additional income from personal appearances. So he would go out, oftentimes dressed as Superman. So he
Now,
had,
was this a newer thing back then?
yes, like they didn't really do this kind of stuff. Like I think the Lone Ranger might have, but this wasn't something that was common back in the 1950s. Now, Reeves had an affection for his young fans, and he took this role model status very seriously. So when he was in front of children, he wouldn't smoke, at least not anywhere where kids could see him. And he eventually quit smoking altogether because Superman doesn't smoke. He's not going to encourage kids to smoke. He kept his private life discreet, including the romantic relationship he had with Tony Mannix. In there is a documentary, and I used to own this on DVD. I don't know if I still do. It's called Look Up in the Sky, The Amazing Story of Superman. It's amazing. It's like 3.5 hours long, but it covers the whole history of Superman. Um,
Wow.
Now, Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen, said that when he first met Reeves, he had told Reeves that he enjoyed his performance in the movie So Proudly We Hail. According to Larson, Reeves said that if Mark Sandrich had not died, meaning the guy who did that movie, he would not be there in, quote, this monkey suit, unquote. So
What?
That's how Reeves felt about playing Superman.
Oh,
According to
so
Go ahead.
Two-Face here. Basically, he likes to pretend to be everybody's role model for the public, but then in private, he's like, screw this.
Yeah, he hates what made him famous. Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yep. So according to Larson, Reeves also said that he would feel better about his role if he knew he had any adult fans, but
Oh,
he never learned that Adventures of Superman had any adult fans during its original broadcast run. So I think he was more upset that he was doing something for kids. You got to wonder if the guy who dressed as Barney felt that way. Yeah, he might have. I don't know. You know,
so just a quick side note, talking about actors that hate the roles that made them famous. Having gone to a couple Comic Cons myself, the actor that played Lando in Star Wars, because
yeah,
we
Billy
love
D.
going back to
Williams.
Star Wars,
Yep.
he hates his life. He's miserable at those things.
Yeah,
He absolutely hate, like, no smiles, no nothing,
yeah,
no camera. He's just sitting there signing away autographs, next. Like he hates the fact that made him famous.
yeah. I've heard that he often smells of alcohol.
I
You
wouldn't
know,
doubt it. I didn't get close enough to bother because I don't want to waste my money on somebody that's just gonna treat me like a number.
right? I have a friend of mine who's part of I believe it's called the 501st Legion,
Okay.
and they're the people that are at Comic Cons dressed as stormtroopers, and they'll
Yeah.
pose with photos. And she was dressed as a stormtrooper as part of the 501st, and Billy D. Williams was a guest at that particular one. And she told me that basically she kind of had that same experience. He kind of smelled of alcohol, didn't really want to be there. And then at the end, like when I'm sorry, and they were told to escort him in and out because it
Oh,
kind of
okay.
cool. He's a Star Wars guy. Let's have some stormtroopers escort him in and out.
Yeah.
And after she had escorted her and a bunch of other stormtroopers had escorted him out. She took off her helmet, and he was just like, "Oh, you're a girl?" And she's like, "Last time I checked," kind of thing, So yeah. Some people don't enjoy it. Like I've been to a lot of Comic Cons, and some of these people, like Eric Estrada, is amazing. I watched him. A woman wanted to take a photo with him, and he was on one side of a table, and she was on the other. And she leaned in and was trying to take a selfie, and he was like, "Oh wait, I blinked, take another. Oh wait," and he came around the table and kind of posed with her. So there are some that are grateful to be there.
Oh yeah, and
Like
honestly, that's how it should be.
it should
The
be.
the people who give you your fame and your fortune and where you're at are the people that watch your material and buy your things, and we keep your career going.
Right. But at the same time, now we're off on a very big tangent here, but people complain about the price of the autographs. But I have to remind people, and I say this all the time, one, it's the going market rate.
Right.
Two, those people are there and this is their time. They're sitting there for hours and hours and hours, just meeting strangers and signing things and what have you. So they are entitled, in my opinion, they deserve to be paid for their time.
Oh, I agree.
And there's nothing to stop you from taking this thing they signed and selling it for more than you just paid for it. So they should get a piece of that. I when I hear stuff like that, I always have to remind people, yeah, it's kind of expensive, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Oh, most
Now,
definitely.
and one last thing before we jump back in here, I remember being at a Comic Con and I was standing at a table waiting for this particular celebrity to come back out. I was the first one. I was right at the table. I was looking down at all the, whatever the 8 by 10 photographs and what have you. And I'm just looking at all the different options. And I hear, "Hi, I'm Ernie." And I look up and there's Ernie Hudson of
Oh,
Ghostbusters fame, right?
yeah.
With his hand out to me to shake it.
That's incredible.
And I was like, yeah, this guy's awesome. That's how it should be, you know.
Yep.
As I also met the kid who played Carl on The Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And granted, at the time, he was like, I don't know, 15, 16. He didn't care that he was meeting me, wasn't particularly friendly. But in his defense, there were a bunch of teenage girls either before or after me.
Yeah.
So I don't really blame him.
Right.
But, I don't know. It was weird. But enough
Can
of that.
can you imagine if they had Comic Cons back in that day?
Well, yeah, I mean, that'd be weird. That would be probably a lot more. Everyone back then probably would have thought they'd be too expensive. But I
Probably.
also don't know that they would have done that then because think about what Eddie Mannix has to do to keep everybody in line. Could
Oh
you
God, yeah.
imagine?
Yep.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work. Okay, so back to George Reeves. Sorry, listeners, that was a long tangent about meeting celebrities. So between the first and second seasons of Superman, Reeves got sporadic acting assignments in one-shot TV anthology programs and in two other feature films, Forever Female in 53 and The Blue Gardenia also in 1953. But by the time the series aired nationwide, Reeves found himself so associated with Superman and Clark Kent that it was actually difficult for him to find any other roles. During the second season of Superman, Reeves appeared in the short film for the Treasury Department, the Treasury Department, entitled Stamp Day for Superman, in which he caught villains
Oh
and
dear God.
told children why they should invest in government saving stamps.
Okay, so what year again was this?
Mid 1950s.
Okay, so one of the earliest definitions, at least in my opinion, from what I've been listening to, is he was typecast.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. He couldn't escape that. He was Superman. And even how did I introduce this episode?
Yeah. Oh,
The death of
exactly. Yep.
Superman.
Yep.
Yeah. After 2 seasons, Reeves was dissatisfied with his salary and the show's one dimensional role. He was in his 40s and he wanted to quit and move on with his career. And producers had to start looking elsewhere for a new star. Now, Reeves went on and established his own production company and conceived of a TV series called Port of Entry, which would all be shot on location in Hawaii and Mexico. Reeves even wrote the pilot script himself. However, Superman producers offered him a huge salary increase and he returned to the series because he's a starving actor at this point.
Right. Yep.
He was reportedly making $5,000 per week, which would be about $50,000 today.
Okay. All right. So nothing to, shake your head at.
No, that's a lot of money. But he was only making that while the show was in production, which is only 8 weeks a year.
Yeah. So he definitely had to get
Uh,
his
correct.
money's worth.
He needed to do it, get his money, because it's only 8 weeks. Think about it, 2 months of your life. Then you can get other stuff, and that's a pretty good sizable pocket change, nest egg to do whatever you need.
Yeah, exactly.
So as for port of entry, Reeves was never able to gain financial backing for the project, and the show was never made.
Ouch.
In 1957, the producers considered a theatrical film, Superman and the Secret Planet. A script was commissioned from David Chantler, who had written many TV scripts. In 1959, however, negotiations began for a renewal of the TV series with another 26 episodes scheduled to go into production. And by mid 1959, contracts were signed, costumes refitted, and a new teleplay writers were assigned. So at this point, they've got it all lined up. Everybody's ready to go. Noel Neal, who played Lois Lane, was quoted saying that the cast of Superman was ready to do the new series because it was still a popular show. At this point, it wasn't showing signs of decline. It was still hugely popular.
Well, that's good.
So in 1956, his friend George Reeves' friend Bill Walsh, who was a producer at Disney, gave Reeves a prominent role in Westward Ho! The Wagons, in which Reeves had to wear a beard and mustache, so because he wouldn't be recognized as Superman. I'm sorry.
Lovely.
That's just funny. That was going to be his final film feature, unfortunately. He would never make another appearance in a movie. But in attempting to showcase his versatility, Reeves sang on the Tony Bennett Show in August of 1956. He also appeared as Superman on I Love Lucy. Have you seen this?
I don't think I have.
It's I don't remember much, but what I remember is hysterical. I mean, granted, it's Lucille Ball, right?
Right. Yeah.
At some point in this episode, Lucille Ball is out on a ledge outside her building, and Superman lands next to her. And Ricardo, her husband, is looking out the window trying to get her to come back in, and they're having this whole exchange. And Superman says to Ricky, he goes, "You're married to her?" And he goes, "Yes." And he goes, "And they call me Superman." That's the thing I remember most about that episode.
That must have been a huge facepalm moment.
Yeah, but it was, I don't know, you'd have to see it. The delivery is really good. I don't know. It was funny. You can probably find it on YouTube.
Oh, I'm sure.
But the second half of that show, Reeves isn't in costume. He's there as himself. He's singing and he's accompanying, like he's playing guitar and singing. And he even has duets with the woman who plays Lois Lane and other people on the set. So it was actually, it was kind of historical.
Did that help or hurt him?
At this point, I don't think he would think anything was helping him.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
So Reeves and Toni Mannix stopped dating in 1958, and Reeves soon announced his engagement to a society playgirl named Leonore Lemon. Now we need to talk about Leonore Lemon.
Okay. The way you said that makes me think that there's a lot of stuff behind that name.
Well, the funny thing is, I really dislike the name Leonore Lemon because it has the double L's. It makes me think of Lex Luthor. Right? And it's not her fault.
Is she just as evil as Lex?
I don't know, to be fair.
Okay. All right.
Maybe you'll have to decide for yourself. Lemon was the daughter of a man by the name of Arthur Lemon, who was a successful Broadway ticket broker. In her early years, she was known as a party girl member of Cafe Society, right, which is Follies type of showgirl kind of thing.
Oh, okay. All right.
She was well known and liked in the nightclub world and was infamous as the only woman ever tossed out or thrown out of a place called the Stork Club for fist fighting. Right? That's pretty good, actually. I think I would find her attractive too. In 1941, she married Jacob Webb, who was the great great grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt. So this guy comes from money. She left him after only 8 days, but remained married long enough for Webb to marry someone else several years later and face bigamy charges. Bigamy meaning you have more than one wife.
Oh yeah. No. Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
the amount of money she must have gotten.
And she later married and divorced a musician named Hamish Menzies, which is an interesting name to say.
Yeah. Wow.
Hamish Menzies. So yeah. So Reeves and Leonore would quickly become engaged. And of course, this made Toni Mannix extremely jealous. You can
Yeah,
hear the
here
tension.
comes the plot
You
twist.
can you can feel the 50s like music ramping up. So Reeves was apparently scheduled to marry Lemon on June 19th of that
Hey, my
year.
birthday.
Oh, cool. And then spend their honeymoon in Tijuana, which I can only imagine was probably much nicer in the 1950s.
I'm sure.
So he would continue to complain to friends, columnists, and his mother about his financial problems. And the planned revival of Superman was apparently only a small lifeline for him. Apparently, he was pretty much in debt. He had also hoped to direct a low budget sci fi film written by a friend of his from the Pasadena Playhouse days. And he had discussed the project with the woman who played the first Lois Lane in the movie before the TV series, named Phyllis Coates, the previous year. However, Reeves and his partner failed to find financing again, and the film was never made. Another Superman stage show was scheduled for July and planned a stage tour of Australia. So at this point, they were talking about doing like a live act and taking it on the road. So Reeves had options for making a living, but those options apparently all involved playing Superman again, a role that he was not eager to reprise at the age of 45.
Now, here's my thought process. At some point, he's just going to hate his life and just start showing up to these things half in the bag.
Possibly. I can't tell you anything. I can't, no spoilers, man.
All right, fine. Fine, fine, fine. Don't give me any hints.
So Jack Larson and Noel Neal, Jimmy Olsen and Lois, both remembered Reeves as a noble Southern gentleman, even though he's from Iowa, with a sign on his dressing room door that said, Honest George, the people's friend.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah. Reeves had also been made a quote Kentucky colonel, unquote, during a publicity trip in the South. And the sign on his dressing room door was replaced with one that read, Honest George, also known as Colonel Reeves, created by that show's prop department. Apparently, there's a photo of Reeves smiling with the sign in the background, which appeared in a book by Gary Grossman about the Superman show. On June 16th, 1959, Reeves and Leonore hosted a friend, a man by the name of Robert Condon, over to their house. They were kind of wrapping up the party when around midnight, two other friends of Leonore, Carol von Ronkel and William Bliss, just show up. And at this point, there's mixed reports. Some say that Reeves was tired and annoyed and he went up right away. Others said that he hung out for a little while, but he was kind of bitter or angry and then went upstairs. Regardless of how that happened, apparently that made Leonore angry. She went upstairs and they had an argument upstairs. Those present claim they heard a gunshot after Leonore came downstairs, but it took them 45 minutes to call the police about it.
Wow, was this guy hated that much?
Reeves died of a single gunshot wound to the head in the upstairs bedroom of his home at 1579 Benedict Canyon Drive in Benedict Canyon between 1:30 and 2 a.m. on June 16th, 1959, according to the LA Police Department report. Now, Lemon attributed Reeves' alleged suicide to depression caused by his failed career and his inability to find work. The report made by the Los Angeles Police Department states that Reeves was depressed because he couldn't get the sort of parts that he wanted. Newspapers and wire services at the time reported the LAPD sergeant saying that Miss Lemon blurted, he's probably going to go shoot himself. So apparently, according to people that were there, Reeves came downstairs at some point and they got into a little argument or whatever, and he stormed back upstairs. And Leonore Lemon said to everyone else present, he's probably going to go shoot himself. They heard noises upstairs, and she continued saying, oh, he's opening a drawer now to get the gun. And then there was a shot, and she said, see there? I told you so.
That's twisted.
Right. My problem with this is why wait 45 minutes to call if that's what happened?
Well, that's why I had said, do they really hate this guy that much? Like,
Right.
is it
And
because they hate him or are they doing it to protect her?
that's what I'm saying. So the official story given by Lemon to the police has her in the living room with the party guests at the time of the shooting.
With a candlestick?
Yeah, right. But there are hearsay statements from other people, colleagues and friends who weren't present. They're saying that Lemon was upstairs when the gunshot went off. So it's tough to say. According to some of the friends, Bill Bliss, who was there, kind of reported that after the gunshot rang out while he was having a drink, that's when Leonore Lemon came downstairs and that she said to them, "Tell them I was down here. Tell them I was down here." Now let's take a look at some real evidence. There are a number of questionable physical findings that were reported by the investigators and others. There were no fingerprints recovered from the gun.
I'm kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop before I, kind of get
Okay.
invested in the evidence here.
Okay. So I'll keep going. There was no gunpowder residue found on Reeves's hand.
Okay, that's a bigger one.
Some sources contend that it may not have been looked for, as gunshot residue testing was not routine in the 1950s, the late
Did the
1950s.
police clean it up?
I don't know.
Oh
So
God.
the bullet that killed Reeves was recovered from the ceiling, and the spent casing was found under his body.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So imagine the position you have to be in to shoot yourself in the head to where it would go into the ceiling, and then the casing that ejects from the gun ends up under your body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
a little weird.
suspect.
There were two additional bullets discovered embedded in the bedroom floor. All three bullets had been fired from the same weapon that was found at Reeves's feet. Although all the witnesses say they only heard one gunshot, and there was no signs of forced entry or any other physical evidence that a second person was in the room. The interesting thing about suicide by gun is the gun doesn't often fall to your feet.
No.
So that's another one. And of course, it was wiped of prints or didn't have prints. So, despite all those unanswered questions, Reeves' death was officially ruled a suicide based on witness testimony and the supposed physical evidence at the scene, according to the autopsy report. Reeves' mother thought the ruling was premature and retained an attorney, Jerry Geisler, to petition for a reinvestigation of the case as a possible homicide. The findings of a second autopsy conducted at Geisler's request were the same as the first, except for this time they found a series of bruises of unknown origin on George Reeves's head and body.
I'm surprised that's the first time you've made that
Me
mistake.
too.
I
Yeah.
was waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, no. So yeah. So they found bruising on his head and his body that the other report didn't list.
Oh, okay. Well, that should be explained or something.
But it's not.
Really, they're just gonna wash it away like it's nothing? Oh my
So
God.
although there was an elaborate funeral for Reeves and was well attended by Hollywood's finest, his body would not be cremated for another 3 years while the investigation was ongoing.
Oh God.
Yeah. His mother hired a detective from the Nick Harris Detective Agency, a young operative named Milo Spiriglio, to conduct an investigation, thereby postponing the cremation of the body for those 3 years. However, Reeves's mother died before there were any substantial new evidence to be uncovered. And this investigator basically is not getting paid anymore. So you can kind of see where this is
So,
going. Yeah.
wow.
So a month later, having uncovered no evidence contradicting the official finding, Geisler announced that he was satisfied that the gunshot wound had been self-inflicted and he withdrew. So it is officially a suicide despite all of these questions, despite all of these players, because you have the four people present, which is his fiance, who's clearly having a fight with him in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You have Tony Mannix, the jealous ex, who has every motive. You have her husband, who's a mob guy, who's probably pissed off that his wife is upset, who has every reason to do it. And, maybe he really did kill himself. Obviously, I doubt that because I'm talking about it on a murder podcast.
Right? Yeah.
I pretty much made up my mind. Reeves is interred at the Mountain View Cemetery in a mausoleum in Altadena, California. In 1960, Reeves was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard for his contributions to the TV industry. In
For the
1980,
one thing he hated.
right? In 1985, he was posthumously named one of the honorees by DC Comics in the company's 50th anniversary publication called The 50 Who Made DC Great. So Eddie Mannix would have a heart attack in 1959 and would have to stay in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He died on August 30th, 1963, of a heart attack in his home in Beverly Hills. Tony Mannix reportedly remained dedicated to Reeves after his death and even had a shrine made for him. She would develop Alzheimer's and pass away in 1983 in her home in Beverly Hills. Approximately 4 days after George Reeves's death, Leonore Lemon left California and never returned. After learning that George left his entire estate to Tony Mannix, Leonore replied to the press, quote, "Tony got a house for charity and all I got was a broken heart," unquote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So keep in mind, like, George Reeves leaving his estate to Tony Mannix, and I didn't really go into this, that's not very surprising because she was rich and she basically paid for everything for him while they were dating.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was able to she kept him afloat more than anything else. So him leaving everything to her, that just makes sense to me. So Leonore's response is jealousy, I suppose.
Yeah, I
Maybe
can see
maybe
that.
a little bit of gold digging. So Leonore returned to New York where she would live for the rest of her life. According to her family, the last years of her life were in an alcohol dementia, whatever that means exactly.
That sounds like an awful way to go.
Her body was found in her apartment on January 4th, 1990, but her death certificate states that she died on December 30th, 1989. So she wasn't discovered for 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was the holidays and, alcohol dementia, whatever that leads to.
Yeah.
So that's basically the story of all those players. Now, a couple pop culture references here. There is a song by Don McLean, who's famous for having written American Pie, called Superman's Ghost. And I actually love this song. And the whole time I was working on researching this case, that song would get stuck in my head. And the opening lyric to the whole song goes, "I don't want to be like old George Reeves, stuck in a Superman role." So,
What?
yeah, it's a good song. Look it up. It's really
Oh,
good. And more recently, another pop culture reference, in 2006, Ben Affleck portrays George Reeves in a film called Hollywoodland that depicts everything we just talked about. So,
that's cool.
yeah, so you have Ben Affleck, who's been Batman, and George Reeves as Superman. And something I didn't put in here because this is one of those things where it's unknown how true it was. Apparently, at one of those public outings that he did as Superman, he was at like one of those Western sets kind of thing, and he's out there pretending to be Superman and punching bad guys off of roofs and stuff. While he was doing that, supposedly, a little boy walks out and aims a gun at George Reeves and says, "Hey, Superman, since you won't get hurt, can I shoot you?" And and George Reeves reportedly had to talk this kid down. he was kind of, and he went through the whole thing of, you won't hurt me, but the bullet might ricochet off me and hit someone else, and then they would get hurt. And he's able to get the gun out of the kid's hand, which is crazy. And I don't know how true that is because I would say it's 60-40 that it really happened.
Sounds like quite the intense standoff.
So as I said before, it's obvious to anyone listening that I think Reeves was killed by someone else. I think Leonore probably killed him. What do you think, man?
I completely agree with you. I don't believe the suicide at all.
What about Tony or Eddie? You don't think they did it?
Um, maybe Tony.
I
I
just
mean, I feel
I
like everybody had a small important motive against him.
My only thing about Tony not having been the one to do it is if Leonore was there and knew Tony did it, she would not let her get away with it.
Yeah, true.
So I think Leonore shot him. How else do you get two bullets in the floor and then one in his head? So I'm guessing there's a struggle and two bullets go into the floor as they're struggling with the gun. And somehow, as they're coming back up from the gun being aimed at the floor, the bullet goes into his head, into the ceiling. The casing lands on the bed, and he falls back on top of the casing. And then she wipes the gun of her fingerprints and drops it to the floor. And then she goes,
Okay, yeah, I
and then
can
she
see that.
goes downstairs and tells everyone they have to get their story straight. And it takes them 45 minutes to get everybody on board on the details. That's my take.
Now that you explain it that way, I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah. But I don't know, listeners at home, why don't you go onto our Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads or onto Facebook, again, Unsung Murder Ballads. Comment on the pictures we're going to post later today of all these amazing people. And let us know what you think. How do you think he died? Do you think it was suicide? What are your thoughts? And yeah, keep those case suggestions coming in. You can do that the exact same way I just suggested. Anything else on for parting words, Jameson?
I think this was a great case to go over. I think there's a lot for discussion. And like you said, Janice, give us your thoughts. Let us know what you think as far as who did it, or if you think it was a suicide, why do you think that? And let's open up a discussion and let's
It's
investigate this even further.
yeah, it's weird to say, but let's have some fun with this. Like
Yeah,
who killed Superman?
yeah, right.
All right, so thanks for listening, guys. I am Janice Dead,
I'm Jameson dead.
and we'll see you next week.